The current capital of Indonesia is Jakarta, which is located on the island of Java. It is the longest inhabited city in Southeast Asia, and the population is currently 23 million. Jakarta is also facing a serious problem. It is currently sinking. Everywhere one looks on the island, the surrounding bodies of water are swallowing up the urban landscape at a worrying rate. The government's solution to this problem? To build a long and thick anti-flood wall along the northern shore of Java. A quick geography lesson for those of us unfamiliar with this part of the world. Jakarta is actually a large area officially designated as a province of the country of Indonesia. It has the special status of being a capital, even though it's not technically a city. Jakarta is at a negligible altitude, essentially a wide and marshy plain, with many rivers running through it. The island of Java, on which it lies, is surrounded by the Java Sea to the east and the Indian Ocean to the west. Zooming out a bit more, Indonesia is a grouping of islands, politically designated as a country. Important to the story is that Jakarta specifically, and Indonesia in general, are surrounded by immense bodies of water that continue to chip away at its foundation, literally. Indonesia has been recorded as sinking for over 25 years, and the urban landscape is unfortunately increasingly sinking into the sea. The capital of Jakarta and the entire island of Java have subsided an astonishing 5 meters or 16 feet, and counting since 1999. Shocking statistics have been recorded, and even more shocking predictions and hypotheses have been made by local and international experts, the BBC reports. It is already happening. North Jakarta has sunk 2.5 meters or 8.3 feet in 10 years, and is continuing to sink by as much as 25 centimeters or 9.8 inches a year in some parts, which is more than double the global average for coastal megacities. Jakarta is sinking by an average of 1 to 15 centimeters or 0.4 to 5.9 inches a year, and almost half the city now sits below sea level. This issue is not limited to flash floods that cause property damage and inundate basements and entire ground levels. Unfortunately for residents and the future of Jakarta, it is the very foundations of Java Island that are being sucked up by surrounding waters. One resident in North Jakarta describes, "The walkways are like waves, carving up and down. People can trip and fall. Year after year, the ground has just kept sinking." Indonesians are no strangers to floods, as we've mentioned before. In fact, the country has a long history of dealing with these natural disasters. One of the most devastating floods on record occurred in 2013, when torrential rains caused widespread destruction and loss of life. The floodwaters rose to unprecedented levels, with some areas experiencing over 630 centimeters or 248 inches of rain in just a few days. The consequences were catastrophic. 57 people lost their lives, and the economic damage was estimated to be $490 million. The 2013 flood was particularly notable because it highlighted the vulnerability of Jakarta, the capital city, to flooding. At the time, it was said that it would take the city 30 years to recover from the damage, but unfortunately, Jakarta's flood woes are far from over. The city's low-lying terrain and rapid urbanization make it prone to flooding. In fact, just a few years later in 2020, Jakarta was hit by another massive flood. The disaster was triggered by heavy rainfall, and water levels in the streets reached up to 6 meters or 19 feet in some areas. The impact was severe. At least 42 people were missing or presumed dead, and over 397,000 people were forced to seek refuge in shelters. The floodwaters also caused widespread damage to homes, businesses, and infrastructure. The 2020 flood illustrated the fact that Jakarta has been in dire need of flood mitigating infrastructure for decades. So, Mother Nature's mood swings, if you will, are in large part the cause of inundation in Jakarta and the Indonesian islands in general. However, some researchers suggest otherwise. It's been posited that constant flooding is predominantly due to rapid removal of fresh water from the aquifers beneath the city, as inhabitants create illegal wells to access the water. Researchers claim that although annual rainfall can amount to 1,850 millimeters or 73 inches, the aquifers are not fully recharged, a problem exacerbated by the urban land cover. What does all that technical jargon actually mean? Well, in other words, the underground water storage system beneath Jakarta's foundation, which are meant to act as a natural barrier to prevent flooding, are no longer working effectively. These underground water storage systems, which are semi-permeable and designed to absorb water, have become ineffective because the fresh water that fills them is constantly being removed. As a result, the water level in these underground storage systems is out of balance. When heavy rainfall occurs, the underground storage systems are unable to absorb and equalize the excess water, which means they are unable to function as intended and prevent flooding. Solutions proposed in the face of such pressing infrastructural and livelihood issues include the relocation of the capital and building an entirely new city on another island. The current contender, however, is the seawall project. As early this year as January 2024, the government announced plans to build an anti-flood seawall around the island of Java, wherein Jakarta is located. This project would cost a hefty $60 billion, and critics say that will likely put the nation further into debt. Others also point to the environmental impact of such building projects in such a fragile ecosystem. The project would roll out as follows: the building of a 120-kilometer or 74.5-mile coastal and river dike by 2030 would be complemented by an adaptive seawall to the west and east of Jakarta by 2040, before closing the seawall with a reservoir by 2050. The Indonesian government has called this plan the National Capital Integrated Coastal Development Project, has a budget of $60 billion and is projected to finish the first phase by 2027. This preliminary phase includes the construction of embankments. An embankment is a wall of piled-up earth, stacked stones, or other impermeable material that prevents rising sea levels from overflowing and causing flooding. Jakarta and the entire northern region of Java Island have been in dire need of such infrastructure for decades. Throughout 2024, it appears that construction is moving forward, with approximately 12 to 14 kilometers or 7 to 9 miles being built. The projected cost of the first phase of the project is approximately $10.5 million. However, the project is not without its naysayers and drawbacks. Firstly, there are environmental concerns. The lugging of materials back and forth combined with the destruction of natural habitats is cause for concern among critics of the project. Seawalls have already been criticized elsewhere in the world for being ineffective, capital-consuming, and short-term responses. Then there is the question of funding. The Indonesian government has described a public-private funding scheme, wherein private investors would provide 80% and the national government 20% of the funds required. Foreign investments, of course, are often favored by government and always on the table with a large-scale infrastructure project such as this. As recently as October 2024, top government officials courted Chinese investors to fund their seawall. The Indonesian government was expected to meet with representatives and contractors from Doha, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Hong Kong, Beijing, and Shanghai. Indonesia is a beautiful place with a rich history, but the government and its inhabitants face a myriad of socioeconomic issues: intense air pollution, interminable traffic congestion, densely populated cities, and great wage inequality. In addition to all of this, the people in this region are facing the very real possibility that the land on which they sleep, walk, work will be engulfed by the surrounding water in the next 20 to 30 years. To solve this pressing concern, authorities and contractors have planned to build a seawall that will protect at least the capital, Jakarta, from sinking further. What do you think? Will this last? Can the solution be as simple as a wall? Let us know in the comments. Did you enjoy the video? Watch more on the Urban Jungle channel.